And then
first of all, the property tax that was introduced by this Fine Gael Labour government was opposed by the Labour Party in their manifesto in the 2011 election. They were against this kind of property tax, and they argued for a site value tax that would take into account ability to pay, whether people had paid stamp duty, people in negative equity, etc. So in fact, Dermot, before the 2011 election, was against the kind of property tax he's now introducing. Sinn Féin makes a range of proposals in terms of where we get the additional revenue. The problem with the current property tax is it's grossly unfair. It's levied on many people who don't own an asset, they actually own a debt. It takes into account, doesn't take into account ability to pay. But here's the rub. None of the 4 Dublin local authorities got a single cent of the property tax that was raised in Dublin last year. Not a single cent. We were sold by Labour and Fine Gael that this would improve local services. You're charging people more and they're getting less services. Services are being privatised, services are being sold off. So for the ordinary people, for example, I think we do need to generate additional tax revenue from a range of sources. That's why the Sinn Féin pre-budget submission every year outlines the Sinn Féin pre-budget submission. I will do. The Sinn Féin.
Tell us. Give us the figures.
I'll absolutely give you the figures.
I mean, Gerry,
don't call it Alice in Wonderland until you've heard it.
Until you've even bothered. 4 years in a row, we have published detailed, fully costed pre-budget submissions outlining where all the tax revenue would come from. For example, the wealth tax that we propose, your own Minister for Finance in the Dáil is on record as saying it would probably raise somewhere between 400 and 500 million, about £500 million, we think a little bit more. A third band of income tax, again, the figures from the Department of Finance show what it would raise. So there's no dispute in terms of where the alternative sources are. The problem is your government won't make those choices. So yes, let's have services and let's be able to generate the revenue for them. But Dermot, how can you ask taxpayers of the City and County of Dublin to pay a property tax when we didn't get a single penny of it and they're getting less services despite the fact that they're paying more tax? Never mind the fact that by taking that money out of their pockets, you're damaging the domestic economy and you're leading to further job stagnation. And it's all very well saying that we have some job growth, and we have some, albeit very small. What we also have is 1,700 people every single week leaving this state.
No, sorry.
Most of them young, most of them in search of work.
And 62,000 new jobs were
I am not disputing that. I'm not disputing those figures, Gerry. 1,700 people, many of them young, leaving the country every week. And the reason why? Less under 25s working today than when you took office. Less, not more, because you're failing to invest the adequate amount of investment to get people seriously back to work. 3 years into this government and the economy domestic is still stagnating. It will come from the National Pension Reserve Fund, from the European Investment Bank, from the cash reserves and from the reserves of NAMA. Again, time after time we've presented this to you. You haven't even bothered to read it, Gerry, and yet you then come on the show and start talking about fantasy economics. Read the stuff before you decide to dismiss it.
Owen's point about ability to pay really is.
We've had a housing crisis in this city for a decade, and there is a very clear and simple reason. Because first of all, Fianna Fáil and then Fine Gael and Labour have slashed the capital budgets for local authorities, whether it's Dublin City or South Dublin or Fingal, to provide the housing that are needed. We have half the amount of social housing in this city that's required. 90% cut since 2008 under Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael and Labour. That's why, for example, in South Dublin County Council we have 40 families staying in hostels and hotels at the minute. Families who would never have been otherwise homeless. Now there are problems with rent supplement. The fact that, as Fianna Fáil did before, Fine Gael and Labour have cut rent supplement has created additional difficulties. But the real issue is, at a time when housing is cheaper than ever to buy or to build, we have one government and then another slashing it. And that's why people don't have anywhere to live. And again, I mean, go back to your original question. Do I think it's a good thing to throw paint on politicians? No, I don't. But I think it is far worse for politicians to support governments that force families to live, an entire family to a room in a clapped-out B&B in the city centre at huge cost, sometimes 3 times the cost of providing accommodation through the rent supplement system. Just as I think, for example, it is far worse for politicians to take medical cards off people or to take social welfare payments that they depend on. That's the real bullying in our society, not angrily exchanged words. I will have no difficulty with people having robust political conversations. The real bullying in our society is the damage this government is doing to ordinary people. And the real tragedy is this. Dermot sits there and he talks about all the great work he's done. The Labour Party say they are the party of fairness. 3 budgets And what we've seen from Fine Gael and Labour is their budgets are even less fair, according to the ESRI, than the unfair budgets of Fianna Fáil before them. So really, let's not be wasting our time talking about individual councillors throwing paint on Mary Harney or angry exchanges of words with politicians out on the streets. Let's talk about the real issues affecting people out there, which is the housing crisis, which is unemployment.
To Eoin here. This is classic Sinn Féin opposition. There's no, it's voodoo economics. They don't make any structure in terms of where they're going to get their financing. They only talk about taxing the wealth, but it's real opposition stuff. There's no accounting.
I'll give you a straight proposal now, which I proposed in South Dublin County Council, and the Labour and Fine Gael colleagues supported the Sinn Féin initiative, which is this: the Housing Finance Agency has large sums of funds to invest in the provision of social housing. Local authorities can't borrow it directly. Why? Because it goes on the government's debt to GDP balance. What local authorities could do, and we're now beginning to do in South Dublin County Council, is seriously explore the possibility of setting up an arm's length company that could borrow those funds off government balance sheet to build houses and get people out of hotels.
Who
proposed that?
I put a proposal to Dublin City Council.
Jerry, let him finish.
Who proposed it? Sinn Féin proposed it. Your party and Labour and others followed, and we're now implementing it. So we make real proposals
I put a proposal in
in
Dublin
opposition to
City
the damage
Council that
you're
we
doing to
should
people's
issue.
lives.
Don't mind you were proposing.